This is Wickett on Wisconsin. My name's Mike Wickett. After 10 years in Milwaukee talking sports, I took a bit of a break, but now I'm back and here to talk about the Packers, the Bucks, the Brewers, and more with you. And now inside the Koss Headphone Studios, this is Wickett on Wisconsin with me, Mike Wickett. Hey, it's another episode of Wickett on Wisconsin. I think it's a pretty important episode, too, and I'll be 100% honest with you. I kind of regret not doing this episode sooner than 48 hours after the news broke of the Milwaukee Bucks boycotting and then striking and not playing along with the rest of the other teams that are inside the NBA bubble. Somebody said that it's convenient when I pick and choose to be on top of social issues, and you know, if it's a fair or unfair criticism, that's fine. And I'm not here to make excuses about anything. But the news broke. I stay at home with 3 babies, and this is the first chance here that I've had the opportunity to get my thoughts out here on the podcast. Got a lot to say, you know, and hopefully I can get it all out because I know there's a lot of anger and a lot of confusion and a lot of emotion going on right now after what happened in Kenosha and the subsequent fallout since then. You know, I'm going to talk about politics later in sports because I think that we are in a different era than when you and I grew up watching sports in the 90s and the early 2000s. And you can blame whoever you want to blame for that, but that's just my opinion. What happened in Kenosha that started the protesting and led to the rioting and the burning of Kenosha, Wisconsin, was a terrible event. And it could have gone a bunch of different ways. I think if you take a look at it, you take your political bias off, it could have gone a bunch of different ways and mistakes were made all over. Endgame, a guy gets shot in the back 8 times, or 7 times, or whatever the number is, and he's paralyzed from the waist down. And some people are claiming it was an attempted murder job by the police officer. Others claiming the police officer was doing what he thought was the best thing to do because of the situation to keep himself safe. But what happened after that, I mean, I saw the video and you saw the video and we've all seen the video. And I remember I was laying in bed and I saw the video for the first time on Sunday night, just like you. And I leaned over to my wife and I said, well, looks like Kenosha's going to be in some trouble here. And she said, why? And I said, well, there was this shooting, and I showed her the video, and she, you know, like everyone else, had a lot of thoughts on it. And you knew it was going to be big, and unfortunately, riots and protests have been happening, and protesting is fine. Violent rioting is unacceptable. And for the purposes of this podcast, I want to focus on what the Milwaukee Bucks did. Now, they played a game on Monday. It wasn't their most exciting game, but they played a game on Monday. And then Wednesday happened. A couple of days passed, and Wednesday happened. And I remember I was feeding one of the babies, and I'm watching The Jump on ESPN, hosted by Rachel Nichols. And they're talking about the Bucks. They're talking about this. They're talking about that. And at the end, they're rolling the credits. And the credits scene hits. And they said, oh, by the way, there are rumors that the Bucks might be boycotting Game 5 against the Orlando Magic. And they cut away. And I'm like, what? So they cut away to NFL Live. And somebody had to be following this because I was watching on Fox Sports Wisconsin at that point where the Magic were out there, the Bucks were not coming out. And the job done by Marcus Johnson and Jim Paschke on FSW and Zora Stevenson. Unbelievable job. Tremendous job. Bucks decided they were going to boycott the game, turned into a strike. And then the NBA said that we're going to cancel all games on Thursday as well as all the games on Wednesday. And I don't know when we're going to get basketball back. By the time this podcast uploads and you watch the video, maybe we've got basketball back. But that night, there was a meeting, and then Thursday morning there was another meeting, and it was a crazy 48 hours, and I encourage you to go to my Facebook page, facebook.com/Mike Wickett Podcasts, and read the article. I think it's from Yahoo about the 24 hours. and how the Bucks took everybody by surprise. And LeBron James, who leads a lot of the social justice movement in the NBA, being the face of the National Basketball Association, apparently he was a little upset with the Milwaukee Bucks and with George Hill. And, the way the Bucks did it irked LeBron. And it's okay if it did, it whatever. But it irked LeBron because there was no coordinated effort amongst all of the players in the bubble. Because that's part of the reason that the bubble is what it is. There's the Black Lives Matter on top of the court. There's a lot of guys, or some guys, that didn't want to go to the bubble because they wanted to focus on either keeping their family safe from COVID, or they wanted to focus on social justice issues and felt that basketball was not an important thing at that moment. And it could wait till the 2021 year. Probably also mattered they may not have been on a very good team. So after they leave the first night, they come back and there's a coordinated effort, and LeBron sort of sits behind the scenes, I guess, and lets others in some big time names step up and take control of this thing, because the players want the owners and their political power, because those are billionaires, including the Bucks owners, Edens and Lasry. They want the big time political players with the big time political money to get involved, and they want some change in the actions of police. And again, if you saw the video what happened in Kenosha to Jacob, you obviously have an opinion either way, whether it's that the police used excessive force or that he had it coming based on what he was doing. Regardless, we have seen George Floyd, Tamir Rice, a lot of questionable moves made by police. And you can be one of those people that chants Black Lives Matter and believes that there are a lot of good cops. I happen to be in that group. All right? I believe there are a lot of good police. I don't believe that every cop is great, and I do believe that Black Lives Matter. I believe there's a need for some police reform, but I also think there's a need to prop up a lot of police. So the Bucks and the rest of the NBA take off Wednesday and Thursday and Friday, and we'll get back to basketball eventually. They agreed to that. Here on this Friday, the Bucks are actually practicing, but there's no media availability. The reaction to all of this has been very interesting to me, and it's something that I want to talk about. The reaction has been, not surprisingly, the reaction has been divided politically. Nobody wants to come to the middle, man. Nobody wants to be somebody like me who says, yeah, Black Lives Matter. We need to make sure there is some equality. There's some systemic racism we need to take care of in this country, and we should probably applaud good cops. And there's maybe some need for some reform. It's somewhere in the middle. People are oftentimes, especially on social media and in this world, we're too stuck on our view and what we want and how we believe is right that you don't want to listen to the other person. And I think especially you should be listening to the other person if you have no idea what it's like to be that other person. I'm a white guy from the suburbs. I don't know what it's like to be black. All right? I don't know what it's like to be a rural country boy either. I got nothing for that. All right? I got a pretty sweet life. I always have. You know, I lived in the suburbs. I had a roof over my head. I had food on the table at all times. I never didn't have any issues at school. So I don't know what it's like, but I listen over the last 6 months since, more than that, 10 years working in Milwaukee talking about social issues, working in Kansas City talking about social issues. And since the George Floyd marches and protests happened, since that murder up in Minneapolis, it's become even more prevalent. And you should be listening to people who are not like you to hear their point of view. And not just listen, but believe. And so somebody said, wow, these protests, really, what did they do? They didn't play for 2 days and they're going to get back to playing. What is the whole point of this? It's a good question. It's a wonderful question because I thought the same thing. And then I realized that the players who are standing up for minorities who are accosted by police in unfriendly ways, that the players are standing up against police brutality specifically against black men, but I believe police brutality happens against all races. I think it's more so against minorities than it is against Caucasians, but they're standing up against police brutality. And what this did, it showed that these athletes, these multi-million-dollar athletes, you know how much money Chris Middleton makes, you know how much money LeBron James makes, you know how much money Giannis Antetokounmpo is going to make over the next 5 years. They are saying, we have the power. It was awesome to see. It was amazing to see the Brewers get behind the Milwaukee Bucks. It was amazing to see all the other NBA teams do the same thing the Bucks were doing. It was amazing because we live in an amazing time of change right now where we all need to listen and probably shore a few things up. I think it's fair to say. But when the Bucks were in the locker room and weren't coming out against Orlando, they were on the phone with the Wisconsin Attorney General and the Lieutenant Governor. They were talking about change that has to be made within the state. When the players were all meeting with the owners on the big Zoom call on Wednesday night or Thursday, they needed promises that some kind of change was going to be made because protests oftentimes don't lead to any sort of change. This was the players' protest, standing up for everybody else who is affected by this. And I don't know what the end game is going to be. My friend Dan on the Facebook page, she said, what's the end game moment? I don't know. I think I'm going to quote the movie The Social Network when one of the characters asks Mark Zuckerberg in the film, when's it going to be finished? And he said, and I feel the same way about social justice, it's like fashion. It's never going to be finished. Fashion is never finished. Social justice is never going to be finished. Facebook is never going to be finished. You're never going to see a final product on Facebook until it's shut down or Mark Zuckerberg pulls the plug, which I don't think is happening anytime ever. So I don't know what the end game is. I don't know when the credits are going to roll on equality. I don't think it will ever be in a colorblind society. I think there will be white people who hate black people. I believe there will be black people who hate white people, and everything in between. I don't think racism is ever going to go away, but we need to talk about equality, and that's what the basketball players were saying. That's what the NBA players were saying. You need to stand up for us, talking to the owners, and if you don't, we're going to boycott a game. Now, I don't know if the Bucks were going to pull this if it was Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals, but they pulled out of a playoff game. And these guys are plenty rich. These guys have lots of money. Not all of them, but these guys have more money than you and I do. All of them have more money than you and I probably do. And what the players said to the owners, you get on our page, or we're not going to get on that court. And I don't know if you realize how much money the Bucks, the NBA, ESPN, TNT, Disney, how much money would be lost if they decided not to play the rest of this season. And I thought there was a chance. For about a half an hour, I thought, what if there is no more NBA? What if this bubble is done? And it was a possibility. It was a definite possibility. And I think what it expressed was the NBA, and then there were some Major League Baseball teams, including the Brewers, who canceled their games, and you have the Packers and a lot of NFL teams canceled their practices, and the NHL has stopped playing, and the WNBA has stopped playing in solidarity for minorities and for equality and to help fight racial injustice. Because when it all comes, I always talk about this, no matter what the cause is, it always comes back down to money. And so the players decided to pull at the owners and the networks at the purse strings. I said, what are you going to do? What are you going to do to help us? And the answer, and I'm not a big fan of the TV show First Take. I don't really enjoy watching guys yell at each other. But I happened to flip it on, and I caught the end with Max Kellerman and Stephen A. Smith. And Max Kellerman, when they gave him his final thoughts of the Kenosha situation and the ensuing strike by the NBA, Kellerman said, vote. That's all you can do. You can vote. You can vote people in and out of power. And as a matter of fact, a couple of things here. My friends over at brewhoop.com wrote a story. And one of the questions is, the big question is, what can I do? That's the whole point of this story. And you can read it. It's up on my Facebook page. I also tweeted it. Follow me at Mike Wickett. A special session was called for by Governor Evers for Monday, August 31st to address policing accountability and transparency. I'm not going to read the whole article to you, but what can I do? In the long term, and this is for you if you live in the state of Wisconsin, in the long term, know that every seat in the Wisconsin State Assembly is open for the November election. However, in the short term, salient action that you can take to support the Buck statement is to contact members of the Assembly and implore them to show up to work on Monday, August 31st. If you live in Sturtevant, Union Grove, or Burlington, you're in Speaker Robin Voss's district. If you live in Oconomowoc or Watertown or Juneau, you're in Scott Fitzgerald's district. If you live in Seymour or Black Creek, you're in Jim Steineke's district. You don't have to do anything then call and say, I want you to show up to this special session called by Governor Evers. That's an incredible, incredible power that you have as a regular Joe, as a regular citizen. It's an incredible ability that you have. And I implore you to do so if you live in those states and you care about this. The other thing the Milwaukee Bucks have done, and they were the first, and now, I love this, this just came out a little while ago, the rest of the NBA has gotten on board with this, and that is Fiserv Forum, along with every other NBA arena, Fiserv Forum will serve as a voting location on November 3rd. A massive, safe voting location on November 3rd. Your school or your church or maybe your location that you normally go to that's been closed down for whatever reason, wherever you normally vote, let's say it's not there anymore in the city of Milwaukee, they are going to open up Fiserv Forum, just like they're going to open up the United Center in Chicago and the TDS Garden in Boston. They're going to open up Fiserv Forum for you as a voting location. I think it's fabulous. I think it is more put your money where your mouth is. I think it is more, all right, how can we help? Now, we'll see what comes of the November 3rd election in local and state elections along with the presidential election, and that's up to you to decide which way you're going to go. But that was something that was agreed upon. It's a great first step. We'll see what happens next. We'll see what the Bucks do. We'll see what the players do. We'll see what the owners do. We'll see what the rest of the team does. And that's my reaction to all of this is you wondered what is... And I did too. Like I sat there on Wednesday night. I said, what is the end game here? What is the goal of all of this? And the goal of all of this is to get some action. And those are two things that are important. You making sure there's a General Assembly meeting held, attended by your representatives in the state of Wisconsin. That's on Monday, August 31st, called by Governor Evers. And make sure you vote. And the Bucks are going to help you make sure you vote. If you live in Milwaukee, you can vote at Fiserv Forum. The NBA getting behind it. I think it's wonderful. And then there was the divide of fans. And again, I mentioned this in the onset, that there are a lot of people, it comes down to party lines. It always does. Whether you're a fan of the president or you're not a fan of the president, that's where you split on this seemingly. That's where your divide is, unfortunately. And there are a lot of people on social media that I am seeing that are done with the Bucks, and they're done with the Brewers, and they're done with professional sports. I don't understand why. There are certain places I don't eat at or shop at based on political affiliation, but I can get a chicken sandwich anywhere. You're going to dump sports. You're going to dump the professional basketball team and the professional baseball team that you care so much and probably have been a lifelong fan of. You're going to dump the Bucks and Brewers because they are standing up for equality. Let that sink in for a second. You're going to stop watching the teams that you loved, that your dad or your mom or your brother and you went to, or your sister and your cousin or whoever, you went to those games and you tailgated at Miller Park or County Stadium. You were at the Bradley Center, or you were at Fiserv Forum, or you were at the Milwaukee Arena way back in the day. You're going to stop watching because of a fight for equality? I do not understand that. I just don't get it. And then you hear this a lot too. And this is something I could spend a whole hour talking about. Keep politics out of sports. I watch the games so I can escape the real world. And you know what? I used to 100% believe that. 100%. I was on board with that. But you know what? It's 2020. Unfortunately, and you can pick a reason why, unfortunately, you can't keep sports out of politics and politics out of sports. And you can't keep politics out of entertainment and entertainment out of politics. How do I know? We elected to the highest office in the country a reality TV show host, a guy who showed up in the tabloids, a frequent guest on Howard Stern's radio program. Donald Trump is Hollywood, and we elected him to the presidency. He's our president, and he speaks out on sports, and he wanted to be an NFL owner, and he had the USFL. I'm not blaming Trump for this, right? If you know me, you know that I'm not a big fan of the president of the United States currently. That has nothing to do with this. You can't tell me keep politics out of sports. What you really mean is, well, if I don't agree with you, keep politics out of sports. But if I do agree with you, then I want your politics and sports. That's simply the way that it is. You say keep politics out of sports, and Clay Travis was a big keep politics out of sports guy. And then he had Josh Hawley on, a senator from Missouri. And then President Trump called into his show, his nationally syndicated show. I take the call from the president. Absolutely, I would. I'm not stick to sports guy. There's so much going on in this world that it all melds together. It's not cut and dry anymore. The sports talk industry isn't just about, sticks and balls. It's about having an opinion because you're from that community. You live in Milwaukee. You live in Kenosha. You live in Whitefish Bay. You live in Oconomowoc. Wherever you live around the state of Wisconsin, or you lived or you're from, you're allowed to have an opinion. And the guy on the radio or this idiot hosting a podcast can have an opinion just like you. Can have an opinion just like you. It's the truth of all of this. And I believe we need to have more equality. I believe we need to have some police reform. I believe that we need to recognize inequality in this country amongst black people. I also believe we need to prop up good cops because most of them are good. Most of them are really good cops. It's the case that it's the simple truth. And the problem is I say that, and some people are going to get really, really mad at it. Just like some people are mad that I say Black Lives Matter. But until you understand the actual truth behind those that are protesting for Black Lives Matter, it's just hard to hear your anger. And it's hard to hear someone say, I'm done with the Milwaukee Bucks because they're fighting for equality. Again, I'm a white guy from the suburbs. I don't know what it's like, but when I listened to it, my old producer was black, and he would tell me about his neighbor that told him to go back where he came from, or he got spit on and called the N-word in a Walmart parking lot because he was walking in front of a guy's car. Like, come on. So I appreciate you listening. This podcast has a lot of emotion in it, and I've been going over stuff in my head, and I don't know what's coming of this once we get out of the NBA bubble. I don't know what's coming out of this on the basketball front for the Milwaukee Bucks. I do know that the Bucks led the charge of some major needed change in this country, and I'm so excited to be a part of it. I'm so excited to be a fan of it. I'm so excited to talk to you about it because the odds are if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably a fan of the Milwaukee Bucks. And I think it's great what they did. And I hope it leads to more. And I hope you get out and vote, And I hope that you continue to listen to this podcast because it's come to my attention that, you know what, maybe this podcast has to talk more about social issues and not just sports. If you've noticed, I've mostly focused on just talking about sports on this podcast. And maybe I need to dip my toe into more social issues and things like that when I produce this nearly daily podcast. This thing is becoming more than just a once-a-week thing. I mean, as I record this, I'm going to have to do another one tomorrow. I'm going to have to do at least one this weekend because the Big Ten might actually be playing football. That story's on my podcast page, Mike Wickett Podcast on Facebook. It's also up on Twitter at Mike Wickett, and I'll have to talk about that if things continue to develop. But I want to thank you again for listening. I want to thank you again for watching. If you're watching on the video, I really do appreciate it. I think that one of the things we need is more of an ability to listen to each other and not just hear it, understand it, and maybe change our ways of thinking. And that's what this whole week has been, and I am excited to see where it goes. I'll have another podcast for you. Please tell a friend about Wickett on Wisconsin. I would appreciate that. We're on Apple and Spotify and Google Podcasts and everywhere on social media. We're going to have all the videos up on the YouTube page that I have done. If you want to go back and watch it, just search for Mike Wickett on YouTube. Till next time, which could be in like 12 hours, whenever I get the next one up. My name is Mike Wickett. Thank you so much for listening to Wickett on Wisconsin. Until next time, go Pack Go Bucks, and go Brewers. Thanks for listening to Wickett on Wisconsin. If you have any feedback or you want to reach out to the show, you can find me on Facebook, Mike Wickett Podcasts, or you can email MikeWickettPodcasts@gmail.com. And you can find me on Instagram and Twitter @Mike Wickett. Thanks to Silverman Sound Studios for providing the music for today's show. And you can find us anywhere you find your podcasts, including Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Until next week, thanks for listening to Wickett on Wisconsin.